What's up, my good people of the internet? This is Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Of course, I am Dan Tortora, a.k.a. DT, hanging out with you inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, and we are on the road. That's right, I'm in my second home, the great state of Florida, and as I'm down here in my travels, and as always covering the NCAA Tournament, I had the opportunity to speak with the Houston Cougars yesterday. I've spoken with Kelvin Sampson over the years, including in this NCAA Tournament. This time around, I spoke to the student athletes, and so happy to share that with you. We've also had the Gonzaga Bulldogs, the Arizona Wildcats. We have had the Duke Blue Devils, the Florida Gators on the broadcast as well, the Drake Bulldogs this season. So I want to thank the NCAA for their access, as always, to the opportunities to speak with student athletes and coaches and have them here on a Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We appreciate you being with us for your lunchtime this afternoon, as I am on the road and down in Florida. Schedule changed a little bit here, and I had to ad-lib with it, so I appreciate you ad-libbing with me. And, of course, inside the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, I have the opportunity to speak on Great Lakes every single broadcast of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. They are my place to get my vehicles, and so many people have trusted them. We know up north that we deal with the elements, we deal with the weather, and so vehicles that are safe, vehicles that have all-wheel drive, vehicles that are different shapes and sizes that we need for us. And so, I mean, there's so many different things you can get. If you're like me and you want that all-wheel drive and you want that safety and security, the Honda CR-V to me is second to none. And then you look at the HR-V, a smaller version of the CR-V. You look at the Pilot, which is a little bit bigger than the CR-V, as well as the Ridgeline truck that my dad has loved for years. And, of course, the Accord, the Civic. I had a Civic way back when, and they have hybrid vehicles for you as well, and they have the Honda Prologue, which provides for you that electric side of things. So all different ways to experience Honda at Great Lakes Honda City, to keep your car safe, to keep yourself safe, to keep your family safe, and to get to where you need to go to. Great gas mileage as well. So shout out to Honda for all the work that they do at Great Lakes Honda City, and you can see them Monday through Saturday, 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard in Liverpool, New York. Let them know that DT sent you, and if you want a sneak peek of what they have to offer you, you can go to GreatLakesHondaCity.com. With that being said, it is Monday, so Murph is with me here, and Murph and I got a lot to talk about. The NCAA Tournament has found its way to the Final Four, and my bracket looks pretty darn good, except for my national champion. If St. John's was still in it, I'd be feeling really good. My bracket is looking pretty in all these areas. The Duke place, the Houston place. I had Auburn versus Michigan State, albeit I did not have Auburn. So everything looked really, really nice in my bracket, except for the West region, where St. John's dropped off after winning a game. So we will discuss where the bracket's at right now as we head toward the Final Four coming up here in just a few days. This upcoming weekend, actually. Saturday will be the Final Four, and then Monday will be the national championship. Believe it or not, we went from the first round to we're almost done. It's crazy how fast March Madness goes, so we'll get into that. And we'll also get into Major League Baseball. We're going to be a full week into baseball tomorrow. Well, later on this week, on Thursday, will be an actual full week in to the baseball season, believe it or not. So Murph and I will be discussing that, and I'll be telling you where I'm going to be going with my father to celebrate opening week of baseball. Literally within the first week of baseball, my dad and I will be on site, on location, in an awesome, awesome opportunity for him and his favorite team and me and my favorite team together celebrating opening week of baseball. So a lot of great stuff coming up here with Murph inside the Great Lakes Honda City Studios. Let's bring the man in picture, Mr. Brendan Murphy here with me. Murph, how we doing?
Doing good, buddy. Getting ready to possibly go coach a baseball game later. I emphasize possibly because the weather is definitely going to be a factor today. As of right now, at game time, it looks like it's going to be rain, but we'll see. I really would love to. I'd love to go play, and we'll see it. But I know we were talking a little bit about baseball, so I wanted to give that. I also want to give a quick shout out, real quick, to the Penn State men's ice hockey team, who won in overtime and made it to their first ever Frozen Four. I know we're not going to talk about that, but I just wanted to give them a little shout out, be a little bit of a homer one there.
Yeah, no, and in the Frozen Four, I mean, at any level, it's exciting, and it's exciting for me with the high schools and the colleges that I cover. One of the best hockey teams that you're going to find is with Ed Gozick and the Oswego State Lakers men's hockey team. So I want to give a shout out to Ed Gozick. He's been incredible over the years, just a wonderful, wonderful man, a family man, and a caring guy, and one of those people that I can remember exactly where our last conversation was in person because he's just got a warm heart and a kindness to him and a goodness to him. So shout out to him for that. We will be talking about baseball later on in the broadcast and earning a split to open up their season. Thanks to an 8-run eighth inning, my Diamondbacks defeating the Cubs 10-6 to split their opening series of 2025. Thank you, D-backs, for making it fun. And I might as well tell you all now, I, for my dad's birthday, surprised him with the wonderful opportunity that we have to go to New York City to see his Yankees face my Diamondbacks. I am a Yankee second. He is a Diamondback second. And his favorite team, the Yankees, my favorite team, the Diamondbacks. We're going to see the Yankees and Diamondbacks series, which is the second series of the entire season for both teams. And after playing the Brewers, we will have the opportunity to see the Yankees host the Diamondbacks. We'll be in the Bronx, down in New York City, in the Bronx borough for the Thursday night matchup between the Yankees and the Diamondbacks. We're going to be sitting right at the center, so we will see the entire diamond, the entire field, and it'll be a
Upper deck or in the Legends Club?
We're going to be upper deck so that we can see the entire,
so like right behind home plate,
the whole exposure. Yeah, we're like right in
I'm
the
jealous,
center of it
man.
all.
I haven't been to Yankee Stadium yet.
Yeah, so my dad had never been to Old Yankee Stadium or New Yankee Stadium. We changed that on Mariano Rivera's. We had the opportunity on Jackie Robinson Day to be at a Yankee game. So it was honoring Jackie Robinson, everybody wearing number 42. It was also Mariano Rivera's last season as a Yankee and the only one left to wear number 42. So to be there for his first ever game in Yankee Stadium, my first ever game at Yankee Stadium, honoring Jackie Robinson on Jackie Robinson Day with Mariano Rivera's swan song season meant a lot. And now the last game that we went to was the World Series in Arizona. And now we're going to see the Yankees face Arizona. So it's very, very much a story straight out of a book. We saw his Yankees, my Diamondbacks in incredible moments. And now we're going to see them face off against each other in the Bronx in the second series of the season. So it was almost the first series, but they had to play the Brewers first. So we will be jumping off the season there Thursday night in New York City with the Yankees and the Diamondbacks, and I'm very excited to be able to give that to my dad because I love him very much.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be a good time. Very much looking forward to it. So let's get into the NCAA tournament and what's going on. I've had the opportunity, like I said, to speak with coaches and student athletes within the NCAA tournament. And yesterday had the opportunity to speak with the Houston Cougars as they move forward in their season. A couple of seasons ago, I put out my own spin on draft day. I had a napkin in my studio, and on the napkin I wrote Houston no matter what. And in draft day, Kevin Costner's character writes Vontae Mack no matter what, which was the fact that he was going to be drafting Vontae Mack, the linebacker, who was played by now the late Chadwick Boseman. May he rest in peace, and God bless him and his loved ones. So I took a page out of that book, and I had Houston no matter what. And now I'm sitting here saying to myself, was I a couple seasons too early? Could Houston do it? Now, Houston's going to have a tall task with Duke, and Auburn is going to have a tall task with Florida. Very rarely has this ever happened in the history of college basketball on the men's side that every single one seed has expanded out of the bracket into the Final Four. So
I think it's only one other time, right?
It was one other time, and it happened within the last decade or so. And so
I think it was 2008.
we had never. Oh yeah, it's a
what
little
it
bit
was.
longer than a decade now.
Don't ask me why I know that. It literally from TikTok is why I know that.
Yeah, 21st century is the only time that we've seen this happen. And so we have never, ever had all four number one seeds make it, except one other time in history. And now it's twice in history. You would think it would be more than that. But typically on the women's side is when you see the number one seeds make it. The women it's more likely that their 1 seeds and their 2 seeds make it to the end. That's just how it's happened historically with them. So this time around, we're going to see that on the men's side as the number 1 seeds have all made it to the end, whatever it looked like, whatever matchups looks really good, whatever teams are performing well. This is a season where every single one of the number 1s are forward here, and we're going to see a true test of the top 4 teams in the nation duke it out to see who is truly the best. Will it be Duke? Will they be the ones duking it out? Or will it be Houston, a team that I thought could have won a championship a couple years ago? Or will it be the Auburn Tigers, who have found new life under Bruce Pearl, who used to be at Tennessee doing an incredible job there? Or will it be Brendan Murphy and Papa Joe's Florida Go Gators? So it's going to be a really, really interesting thing here to see how this is all going to shake out. But it is going to shake out sooner than later, and I'm really excited for it, Murph. And I'd love to get your thoughts on the fact that we got a bunch of blue bloods. Houston should be considered one, even though they've been underappreciated over the years, especially in the American. But your thoughts on the fact that we now have all 4 number 1 seeds at the end?
I don't really think it's all that surprising this year, and this is probably the best year of number 1 seeds that we've had in a long time. And being able to see all 4 of them make it to the Final Four, I'm not all that surprised. I'm honestly surprised it doesn't happen more often. But Duke has pretty much won by double digits in every game they've played. I don't think they've had any close games in the tournament. Florida had a little bit of a scare against Texas Tech, clawed their way back from, I think they were down 11 with about 6 minutes left. They ended up coming on a 12-0 run or a 10-0 run and took the lead for good. I didn't see much of the games on Sunday, but I know they weren't all that competitive. So, Houston and Auburn made quick work of Michigan State, and Houston played Tennessee. Thank you, because Tennessee was my last Final Four team that I lost. So I had 3 out of the 4. But yeah, I think that I'm not all that surprised. I am surprised it doesn't happen more often. But I'm excited for it. Obviously, being that my team is in the Final Four, this is going to be fun. As it sits right now, I don't know if they're going to beat Duke if they get there. Obviously, Duke's got to get there too, but I think we can pretty much not to kind of rule out Houston. I think it's pretty fair to assume that Duke is probably going to win that game. Houston will probably be competitive. It's going to be the best team that Duke has played in the tournament so far, but I don't see them beating Duke, especially with Cooper Flagg back and healthy. I'm excited to see it. I'm really rooting for the Florida Duke National Championship. I mean that's what I have in my bracket. That's kind of what I've been rooting for all this time. So we will see how that shakes out, but I'm not as surprised as many people would be that we're seeing this outcome in the tournament. Safe to say my no upset bracket's doing pretty well. I'm in the I think top 3% in the world with that bracket.
That's awesome.
Where I literally picked 0 upsets.
Yeah, I mean, and this was the year to do it. This was the year where we did not see a single seed lower than 12 win. No 13, no 14, no 15, and no 16 seed won a single game outside of play-in games when they were fighting to have the seed itself. And in the case of the 12s, only 2 12s won over 5s. That's been the most dangerous matchup. Even more than a 7-10 has been the 5-12 over the years here in recent history. So it's been definitely a season that's not as mad when it comes to March. The madness, it's kind of March.
It definitely wasn't.
No, instead of March Madness, it was kind of March expectation. March. The thought process that it was kind of status quo March this time around. And when we look at Auburn's road of getting here, Auburn defeated Alabama State 83-63, winning by 20 in the round of 64. In the round of 32, they defeated Creighton 82-70. Then I had a almost perfect Southwest bracket when we had our final four that were there of the Southwest, which were within the Sweet 16 of Auburn, Michigan, and Ole Miss, Michigan State. The only one I had wrong was Ole Miss, and Auburn defeated Michigan 78-65. So they won their first game by 20, their second game by 12, their third game by 13, and up against Michigan State, they won by 6 down the stretch. So Auburn has been winning, but they've been winning by a smaller margin as time's gone on, from 20 to 12 to 13, which is right around there, and then by just 2 possessions against Michigan State, who ran out of time. And that's how Auburn gets to the Final Four. Florida gets there with a win over Norfolk State by almost 30, 95-69 in the round of 64. Then they faced off against reigning defending national champion times 2. UConn under Dan Hurley has won the last 2 national championships in men's basketball, and this time around they're bumped out in the round of 32 by Florida. The Gators won that game 77-75 in a very close, highly contested matchup where some thoughts are there down the stretch of what's a foul, what's not a foul, what's this, what's that. And then Florida goes on after that very close game against UConn to face off against the Maryland Terrapins, who have found their way back. One of the unsung heroes of this tournament. Maryland has not been that strong really since they've been since they left the ACC. They were in the top 4 type of team in the ACC, powerhouse team in the ACC, fighting up against Duke and others, and having some rivalries and some good moments there. Going to the Big Ten, they've dropped off a little bit. They've had some moments in the last 20 years, but ultimately this one's probably their proudest moment in the 21st century as of late, with them making it to the Sweet 16, but ultimately losing as a 4 seed to the number 1 seeded Gators 87-71, and then Florida defeating Texas Tech 84-79. So Florida's games end up being a 26-point victory, a 2-point victory, a 16-point victory, and a 5-point victory. So a couple of those games came down to 1 or 2 possessions. The Duke Blue Devils, they started off by facing Mount St. Mary's. They only defeated them 93-49. And in that
Only. Oh my God.
Only. And in that game, obviously I'm joking, folks, don't get weird. So in that game, they won by 44 points over Mount St. Mary's, the largest margin of victory in the tournament, I believe, of any game this season. And then Duke defeated Baylor by 23 in the round of 32, 89-66. Then they scored 100 points against Arizona to outlast an Arizona team that got to 93, beating them by 7. And then they defeated Alabama, the 2 seed of the East bracket, 85-65. So how about this? Duke had more of a test from Arizona than they got from 2-seeded Alabama, who they blew out by 20 points to make it to the Final Four. And then we look at the Houston Cougars, who did not win by 44, but they got close in the round of 64. They defeated SIU Edwardsville, who was in their first NCAA tournament on the men's side ever. They defeated them 78-40, 38-point victory, only outdone by that Duke 44-point victory, which is the largest victory by any team in the men's tournament this season in the entire group of 68 teams, including those play-in games. The Houston Cougars would go on to defeat Gonzaga in a close matchup where Gonzaga came back, and they ultimately defeated them 81-76, in which Kelvin Sampson said, this is not a team that they should have been playing in the second round. Gonzaga should have had a better seed. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
That was the game all along, that if Houston was going to lose before the Elite Eight, that was the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they were going to lose early, they were going to lose to Gonzaga. There was no other team that I thought could beat them.
No, I agree. That game should have been a game for the Final Four, not a game for the round of 32.
Maybe the Elite Eight, but, without a doubt.
No, I'm saying going in like an Elite Eight matchup of who decides.
Yeah, I don't think Gonzaga should have been an 8 seed. No. Maybe a 5 at worst, but 8 was I think, doing them dirty.
Yeah, they wanted to punish them because they lost to St. Mary's this season, and they had a few more losses than they typically do. But Gonzaga,
they didn't dominate their conference like they usually do.
Right, but they won the conference tournament. They defeated St. Mary's, And, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, you look at them and you look at the work that they've done over the years. When they've been a 1 seed, they've been good. When they've been an 8 seed, they've been good. When they first came into the tournament, I believe Arizona was a 1 and Gonzaga was an 8. So to put them back to an 8, they obviously showed you how they play that 8-9 matchup. I don't think Houston wanted that matchup. And Kelvin Sampson and Mark Few both talked about the fact of Kelvin Sampson said it and Mark Few agreed with it, that if Houston is 1A, then if Houston's a 1 seed, then Gonzaga is 1B. So if there's a 1A, there's a 1B in their minds, and Gonzaga proved it in that matchup. And then Houston played Purdue and beat them by 22 after defeating Gonzaga by only 5, to state the case even more. And then Houston defeated Tennessee 69-50. Tennessee failed to score many points in this game, low-scoring first half, and with 7 minutes and a little bit of change to go, they only had 35 points with over, let me think about this now, so with over 30 minutes played, 32 minutes and change played, they had only scored 35 points. So they had scored almost a point a minute when you're talking about Tennessee, who struggled to get anything done against Houston. The defense was good, and they did enough. There was a little surge by Tennessee late, but ultimately Houston won 69-50. So the margin of victory on the Duke side and the Houston side was greater. Florida had closer contests, and so did Auburn, but all 4 number 1 seeds make it. Who do you think... this is what it is going into the tournament. Auburn's the number 1 overall, according to the NCAA Selection Committee.
Wait, I thought Duke was.
No, Auburn was the number 1.
How?
Duke.
They lost in the semifinals of the conference tournament.
Because, Murph, what I tell you on the show all the time, it's one word. It rhymes with schmerative, narrative.
And they lost to another team that was a 1 seed.
Narratives. That's all it is narratives. And Florida got a 1 seed that they weren't going to get because Florida's in the SEC. And when they won the SEC
they won the conference.
Right. But because Auburn was going to get the number 1 seed, Florida winning the whole tournament and having the record that they had, that's why I think Florida got the other number 1 seed over anybody else and over a St. John's, because they regarded the SEC so high. The narrative was there in the preseason. Auburn was the number 1 no matter what happened, it seemed like, in the SEC tournament.
Yeah, and Florida beats them in February, and literally they don't even move from number 1.
Right. And Auburn lost in the conference tournament in the SEC, and they weren't going to move based on those rankings because a narrative was set up. So Florida winning that tournament gave them the other number 1 seed, because how are you going to give Auburn a number 1 seed for losing before the championship game?
And don't get me wrong, like
Florida,
Auburn deserved a number 1 seed. They played well. They played great all year. Like, don't get me wrong, they definitely deserved a number 1 seed. But you mean to tell me that they ranked ahead of both Florida and Duke
and Houston,
who I think most people and Houston.
Houston, I think went 19-1.
They won the Big 12, right?
Houston, I believe, went 19-1 in conference in the Big 12, and only their second season in the Big 12 after leaving the American. And I believe they went 10-0 on the road in the Big 12.
Exactly. So you mean to tell me, like, Houston's the only team you can maybe argue that you could rank Auburn ahead of, but you've got a team they lost to head-to-head. And a team that's been absolutely dominating college basketball all year long when Cooper Flagg is healthy.
Yeah.
What? Don't get me wrong. Florida was not going to be the number 1 overall seed. I thought Duke was going to be. I honestly thought Duke was.
Nope.
I don't know why. Maybe I missed the memo.
Yeah, Auburn was 1 put in the Southwest. Duke was 2 put in the East, and played their first opportunity in Raleigh, like literally had to drive down the street. And so Duke got the 2 seed in which the second number 1 seed, which put them in the East. The third number 1 seed put Houston in the Midwest, and then in the West, Florida got the fourth number 1.
How do you have Florida 4th?
Yeah. So
literally
because they wanted Auburn to be first.
This is the way it should have been. It should have been Duke, Florida, and then pick them between Auburn and Houston. Probably Houston and then Auburn.
Well, they were going to regard...
Auburn doesn't even win their conference, and you still rank them number 1 overall.
Yeah, well, how mad you are right now and how passionate you are right now, think about that the next time we have a college football playoff conversation about rankings. Because Auburn was given more... they were set up to succeed.
But this is
in
different
failure.
though. This is we're talking about a number 1 overall seed.
No, it's not different in the sense of at the end of the day, it's rankings, and the number 1 overall seed is supposed to have an easier road. And so when you look at the number 1 overall seed, now whether they do or not, but they're supposed to be given an easier road. We've seen it in time with Kentucky and I believe Kansas, but the number 1 overall seed given to Auburn, despite the fact that Florida and Tennessee played for the SEC championship, that is something that was already set up. Auburn was set up weeks in advance that they were the number 1 overall seed, talked about as the number 1 overall seed. They lose, there's no change in that. It's like, well, they made it to the Final Four of the SEC tournament. They've done so many great things over the season. Tennessee got a 2 seed, Florida got a 1 seed. And so Tennessee got a 2 seed for losing the conference tournament. But Auburn was going to get that no matter what. Now, how Auburn is not better than Duke, who won their conference tournament, not better than Houston, who won their conference tournament, and not better than Florida, who won their conference tournament, that's what I talk about, what I argue with college basketball and college football, is when these teams win their conference championship, conference tournament, and we look at where they're set up as, because the SEC in the preseason was given the narrative that they were going to be the best conference before a ball was even tipped, and then get to a point where they had already decided weeks in advance that Auburn was the best team in the country. Auburn would have had to fail miserably, and even if they lost early on in like the quarterfinals or something in the SEC, they probably would have just gotten a 2 seed because Auburn was set up to succeed. Florida had to win. Houston had to win. And honestly, because of how they treat the ACC the last 4 years, Duke had to win. Auburn had different treatment than everybody else. That's reality.
Yeah, and that's just ridiculous. I don't even know where to go with that, man. Auburn had, and this is why I think it's different, because they treated Auburn this year the way they treated Alabama, or the way that college football has treated Alabama in years past.
Yeah,
it's because it's Alabama. We knew Auburn was going to be great this year. Because it's Auburn, we're going to, give them the number 1 overall seed. Don't get me wrong. Like, they deserved a 1 seed. They absolutely deserved a 1 seed, whether they won the conference or not.
Yeah.
However, you can't rank them ahead of the team that actually won the conference. It doesn't make any sense. It would have been like if Miami managed to make the playoff over Clemson as an at-large team. Because Clemson won the conference. Why would you put, a team that didn't win the conference in the big dance or in the playoff ranked ahead of the team that actually won the conference? That's where my issue is.
Yeah.
Because you can't be ranked number 1 at the end of the year if you don't win your conference. You can't be ranked number 1 if you don't win your division. You can't be the number 1 seed if you don't win the AFC, if you don't win your division in the NFL. The Vikings had the Vikings had the second best record in the NFC last year.
Yeah.
And they were the 5 seed because they didn't win their division. They didn't win their division. Auburn gets the number 1 overall seed. Yet, not only did they not win the SEC, they didn't even make it to the championship game. They lost to Tennessee.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, it wasn't exactly a close game. Okay, they lost by 5. But that also didn't necessarily tell the whole story of that game. How can you put... And Auburn also, for reference, they were number 3 in the country at the time.
Yeah.
They were ranked number 3, and they lost. How in God's name can you make them the number 1 overall seed after that? It makes no sense. They're going to lose anyway, I think. And this isn't even me saying it as a Florida fan. Florida's going to beat them. They've done it already. They're going to do it again. Mark my words, it will be Florida and it will be Duke playing for the national championship. I don't know who's going to win that game, but it's going to be Florida and Duke, and I'd bet a good amount of money on that.
Well, and that's where we are at right now is these 4 number 1 seeds. Auburn was considered the best by the committee. Duke was considered the second best. Houston the third best. Florida the fourth best. Now they get to duke it out and show who actually was the best, who actually is the best, and who's the one that's going to actually take the cake in all of this when all is said and done. They have the opportunity to settle the score. They have the opportunity to show who it's going to be. Whoever we thought it was, or whoever they thought it was or wasn't, now they have a chance to actually see it. They have a chance to actually know it. This is where we've come down to. We've gotten to the final stretch. We've gotten to the final moment. And this moment is going to put us in a place where it's no longer about who do we think, it's about who is. They get to decide. The 4 number 1 seeds get to decide who is the best team in the nation. And they're going to do that in just a few days. By the end of this week, we will know who's playing for a national championship. By the end of this week, somebody in the SEC is going to make a decision. The Gators won the SEC. Auburn didn't play in the SEC championship game. So now we'll see, is Florida truly the best? Did Tennessee do Florida a favor? Or is Florida actually truly better than Auburn? Or will Auburn prove themselves? And on the other side with Duke and Houston, this is a matchup that's very exciting. It's a blue blood program and a program that should be a blue blood program. It's a Houston team that I've heard Kelvin Sampson say numerous times does not get the respect that they deserve. A Houston team that doesn't get the coverage that they deserve. A Houston team that is used to not having a lot of people around, a lot of media, a lot of fanfare until the end. Until we're at this point. That people don't pay attention to them. That they don't look to them. That they don't talk about them. They don't regard them as a really good team. Yet Houston has shown with Kelvin Sampson numerous times that they can do this. Houston has shown that they could vie for a national championship. Houston was relevant this year. They still are. They were relevant last year. They were relevant the year before that. They have been in the national conversation. They're a Sweet 16 team, and a lot of times they're an Elite 8 team. They're a Final Four team, and they're a team that is on the precipice of winning a national championship, something I thought they were going to do, like I said, 2 years ago. Could happen right now. But in order for Houston to get to the national championship, they have to defeat who I consider to be the best team in the field, which is Duke. And if they defeat Duke and go to the national championship, speaking of the Cougars, do they have an easier game against Florida or Auburn? Now, Duke is going to be challenged. Duke is going to have to show themselves. They might overlook Houston. They might be thinking about what's next. Now, I don't think they will because John Shire is a good coach. And he gets through to his players, and he has a great relationship with his players at a time where it seems very difficult to have relationships with your players because of the transfer portal and NIL. He seems to be doing it and doing it very well. Hashtag LL Cool J. So, as we're here right now in this moment, Houston is David. That's how they're treated. Duke is Goliath. And on the other side of it, the Tigers and the Gators, well, it's kind of like if you opened up 2 cages in the zoo and wanted to know who's actually the stronger one. We're going to find out if a tiger can handle a gator or if a gator can best a tiger. Will the gator grab the tiger, take it down into the depths of the water, and drown it? Or will the tiger reach into the water, pull the gator out, and make him pay on land? That's a question. On the other side of it, a Blue Devil versus a Cougar. Who's going to win that one? Is it Cooper Flagg and National Player of the Year and John Shire Coach of the Year, and is everything going to line up for Duke? Or will Kelvin Sampson finally get something that I think he's been on the precipice of for the last couple of years? Every storyline here is amazing. Every opportunity that we're going to see is great. The one thing I can hope and pray for in the next couple games is that these games are close. They're highly contested. They come down to the last few seconds. The teams decide and not the officials. And I really hope that we have at least one overtime in the next 3 games of the 2 Final Fours in the championship. This is setting up to be an amazing dinner. And I cannot wait to sit at the table with this one.
It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
So with that being said, Murph and I are going to take a step aside for a fast break. When we come back, inside of the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, we will continue the conversation of the NCAA tournament, and I will also give a nod to the women's side as we've talked about the women's tournament with Caitlin Hodge-Mahalis and Gabby Holko, 2 coaches in the collegiate world that will both be at the Final Four and championship game in Tampa on the women's side of things. So excited for that, excited that they get to experience it. And we'll be back to talk about the women's side of things as well as the men's and jump into some baseball as we are still within the opening week of the 2025 season. Right here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports meets life. Stay with us. Here's a message from Renee from Bryan's Landing, located on 6523 East Seneca Turnpike in Jamesville, New York. Open Tuesdays and Wednesdays for dinner, Thursday through Saturday for lunch and dinner, and Sundays for brunch.
It's a lot like the way that my mom and dad ran their restaurant. We have put in place a lot of people that are family to us, very similar to how my dad hired people that were family to him. And then the tradition I'm carrying on is a lot of the items that are on our menu are my dad's. And he taught our chefs how to recreate his dishes. So I think that Tommy McNerney, who our executive chef is, to him it is an art. And I think that when he does create a dish, it's not just about making the food taste delicious, which is definitely our priority, but it's an art to him, and it's almost like his canvas on a plate where he just wants the colors to look great, and people love it because he takes pride in that. And Bryan and I appreciate that. We want it to obviously look good and taste good. I will tell you, when we opened up, it was 6 weeks before COVID. And what was amazing was the community, our friends and family stepped up, and everybody did takeout. Everybody supported us. Our hearts were just so filled. So to Bryan and I, obviously our friends come all the time, and we just have repeat customers in Jamesville, and I think people going to our previous restaurant in Green Lakes are making the trip to come to Bryan's Landing to support us. And I mean, I think we have great food and a great atmosphere. So it's very, very important to us.
Head to Bryan's Landing, located on 6523 East Seneca Turnpike in Jamesville, New York, where memories have become recipes that are now meals to share with you. Tuesdays and Wednesdays for dinner, Thursday through Saturday for lunch and dinner, and on Sundays for brunch. And be sure to come out for live music Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Here is a special message from Brian Bruno, owner of Servomation Refreshments Incorporated.
I grew up in the family business. Had the experience of working for a national food service company with thousands of employees. And as much as I enjoyed the experience I had, there was something about, owning my own company and being able to change the things I saw wrong with the industry firsthand, which is why I moved back to my hometown in Canastota, New York to launch Servomation. It was back in 2007. When we first started the business in 2007, really you didn't find any machines with credit card readers. There's a lack of variety in machines. You got stuck with basically whatever the vending company wanted to sell that day. There's a lot of inefficiencies in the business, and those were all things that we saw as opportunities, both from a customer level to improve and from an operating level to be more efficient. We've really been at the forefront of introducing retail technology into our space. We were doing self-checkout back in 2009 before it really became a national phenomenon. The whole point of it isn't to just improve the customer experience. It's to make it feel more like a retail environment where people don't have to be afraid of what they're buying behind glass. They don't have to be afraid of not being able to see the ingredients of the packages. It was an easy transaction from that standpoint. If we were to reinvent something, we wanted to make sure what we were making looked and felt more like a deli and not like something that you would traditionally see in a vending machine. I was tired of hearing for years the customers say the wheel of death because the vending machine would circle around with the same tuna salad in it. What we wanted to do was it really change the perception of that food. So allowing customers to touch it, allowing customers to feel the weight of it, allow customers to see the freshness of it, and also the variety of it really helps them change the perception and ultimately the value of what we bring to them. The point of differentiation you have to make is either in value or the quality. And I think on both of those fronts, Servamation has really, in large part, changed that value system for employees. So they no longer have to worry about bringing their food from home or having to leave their desk during the day and rush out to get back in time for their break to end. We're bringing something that they can count on in their break room every day, and they know it's going to be there, they know it's going to be fresh, and they don't have to worry about it being sold out or something that they don't enjoy. We've also heavily invested in flavored water machine, so you can get a glass of water with a fresh piece of fruit in it, along with bean to cup coffee machine. So there's not a day that goes by we're not surprised when we get customers that call us and say, we didn't know you could do all this. We're really lucky to have a strong group of dedicated employees. Most of our employees have been with us since inception. They're family to us, and people like doing business with people they like and trust. And I think the same thing goes for employees. In a day and an age where there's a lot of corporations that just look at an employee as a number and don't get to know them, that's just not the way I was raised or how I like to do business. So we're a little old-fashioned. We like getting close to our employees. We like knowing how we can help them. We like knowing how we can improve their lives, adjust their schedules, whatever it may be to help improve their quality of life. And we think in the end that makes for a happier employee. We're fortunate enough to have really grown over the last several years, and from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts to Connecticut, we really do have a strong connection, even though we're not in the rooms every day with these employees. There's not one single employee that we feel like we don't know, and certainly we know they can call us at any time, and they're definitely treated as family to us. I wake up every single day really excited to surprise our customers in a good way. The one thing I can tell you is I think that every one of our employees and every one of our customers will continue to be at the forefront of every decision we make.
Find out how Servomation can help you and your business by going to servomation.com.
Hi, this is Amy from Mother's Cupboard, home of the whole frittata. We are open daily 6 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. For takeout orders, call 315-432-0942 and tune in to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora for our monthly food challenge and try our Wake Up Call signature menu item available 7 days a week. Here at Mother's Cupboard, we are Central New York, and it's our honor to serve you.
Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory remind us that every day is worth celebrating at 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, New York. Open Monday through Saturday in-store and always online at maandpaspopcorn.com. Serving our Central New York community and beyond, order anywhere, anytime at maandpaspopcorn.com. Stop in to get a tin at Ma and Pa's on 201 7th North Street in Liverpool, New York to get your half-price refills for the rest of your life. Come to Ma and Pa's for your holiday gift giving for family, friends, employees, and clients. And remember, for fundraising and events, to call 315-450-6272. That's 315-450-6272. Ma and Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory. How corny are you?
This is Jimmer Sikowski, owner-operator of Chick-fil-A Cicero, 7916 Brewerton Road in Cicero, right in front of the Home Depot. I had a deep feeling that God wanted me to do something bigger with my life and to help people, help others. I kept putting Chick-fil-A in my life, and I realized as I was going through the franchise selection process that positively impacting the lives of others was really core to what we do here at Chick-fil-A. First of all, it starts with the food. The food is brought in fresh daily. We bring in local produce. We prepare to order in the kitchen. We hand bread our chicken. We hand spin our milkshakes. It's great food. It doesn't taste like fast food. I think the second thing is the way people feel when they come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. It's different. We try to treat people with intentional kindness here, which is very different and deeper than good customer service. And so I think it feels remarkable for most people to come in a Chick-fil-A restaurant. And then lastly, the impact that we try to have in the community is very different. it's a big part of the expectation of every operator of a Chick-fil-A restaurant is that they're actively engaged in their community, they're a leader in the community, and they're making a difference. When they realize that what we're striving to do is to shine a little light in their life, that's a very, very different experience than you will have at any other quick service restaurant. And it's that remarkable experience that I think people will emotionally connect with.
Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We appreciate you being here, hanging out with us every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Today, because I'm on the road in the great state of Florida, the second home of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, we are here with you a little bit later on your lunch break as opposed to being with you typically in the mountain. So hope you're doing well. Hope you're having yourselves a wonderful day. Guess what? The women's side of things has not been decided. We have Spokane and Birmingham, who have been the homes of deciding who's going to make it to the Final Four. Spokane is bracket 1, Birmingham is bracket 2 and 3, and Spokane is bracket 4. That's how they break down their number 1 seeds. And so as we look at this right now, UCLA and LSU have been going up against each other, and UCLA and LSU have decided, and that team that was made it to the Final Four is UCLA, who won 72-65. Taking a look at the women's bracket, UCLA out of Spokane won. That number 1 seed defeated Southern by the score of 84-46. And then in the next round defeated Richmond by the score of 84-67, then defeated Ole Miss by the score of 76-62, and then defeated LSU by the score of 72-65. NC State was my dark horse to come out of the UCLA bracket. They ended up losing to LSU by just 7 points, or else they would have been playing UCLA for the opportunity to go to the Final Four on the women's side. And then in the second bracket, which is Birmingham, which is called Birmingham 2, South Carolina in their first matchup against Tennessee Tech won 108-48, 60-point victory on the nose for Dawn Staley and the crew. Then they defeated Indiana 64-53. 64-53 in a low-scoring game, 64-53, and then they defeated Maryland, as Maryland made it deep in the women's bracket as well. They defeated Maryland 71-67, and then they took on the Duke Blue Devils, who I had them taking on in the Elite Eight, and South Carolina, who I had winning, did win in a close matchup with Duke, 54-50, or else Duke would have made it to the men's and women's Final Four, and they were both playing in that same bracket, the number 2 overall, the second bracket when it comes to number 1 seeds. But South Carolina was the number 1 seed on the women's side, and in the second bracket, Duke was the number 2 seed instead of the number 1 seed like they are for the men. South Carolina wins it. They move on. I had that happening. And then Texas goes up against William and Mary and wins 105-61. Then they defeat Illinois 66-57, and coming out of there, they defeat Tennessee they defeated Illinois, not 66-57, that was 65-48. I was looking at Illinois' bracket. Then Texas and Tennessee, I didn't know who to pick. I picked Texas. I was a little nervous that I picked Texas and not Tennessee, because Tennessee's a good team too, and they defeated UConn this year. But Texas ends up winning, makes me right, and they won 67-59. They will face off against TCU. I had Notre Dame in the bottom part of that bracket. So Texas could be my other Final Four team to make it, as I had NC State, which I got wrong, South Carolina, which I got right. Texas, we'll find out today on March 31st at 7 p.m. Eastern Time if Texas or TCU, both teams from Texas, somebody from Texas is going to make it to the Final Four there. And then in the USC bracket, USC defeated UNC Greensboro 71-25. It's not a typo. In the first round. And then in the next round, they defeated Mississippi State 96-59. Then Southern Cal went on after facing on, and then they defeated Kansas State, 67-61. UConn made it in the bottom of the bracket, defeating Arkansas 103-34. Then they defeated South Dakota State 91-57. Then they defeated Oklahoma in a game that I had predicted, and they won that game 82-59. And so I had Kansas and USC facing off at the top of the bracket, which they did. And I had UConn and Oklahoma in the bottom of the bracket, which they had. And I believe I picked Kansas to upset USC, but ultimately I have UConn winning. We'll find out if UConn is going back to the Final Four. Tonight, the game tips off at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, also on ESPN here on March 31st. So we've decided half of the women's Final Four, UCLA, which I had wrong, South Carolina, which I had right, and I have the opportunity to be right on my other two. If Texas defeats TCU and UConn defeats USC, I will have 3 out of my 4 Final Four, and my national championship game will still be intact. Murph, any thoughts on this, including on the fact that there were women's games where teams scored 34 and 25 points? I mean, to lose a game by more than 50 points is just insane.
Well, considering UConn won their first round game by what, almost 70? I remember when, in the, I guess you could call them the bad old days with UConn, when Gino Auriemma and that team would routinely win games by 80 to 90 points.
Yeah.
And this is what I don't like about women's basketball. It is so top heavy that literally, unless you're a top 2 or 3 seed, you don't have a chance to win the tournament. You just don't. And that's the way it's been basically my whole life. I mean, when UConn was dominating women's basketball, winning 90-something games in a row, anytime you go and fill out, and I can kind of, Dude Perfect did a March Madness stereotypes with their brackets and everything years and years and years ago. And they had a stereotype where you do the women's bracket, and they're saying, all right, time for the women's bracket. Who do we got? Yeah. Everybody in unison. UConn. And it was as simple as that. Because it was just UConn. And for years, nobody could beat UConn. Obviously, they're not the, terrifying threat that they've been in years past. They're not going on and winning, national championships, going undefeated anymore. But they're still winning a lot of games. They only lost 3 games this year. I mean, Paige Beckers is one of the best players that UConn has ever had, as crazy as that sounds, because they've had some great players come through that program.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to think anybody other than UConn is going to win this thing. Although I know for a fact, and obviously I don't follow the women's game as much as I do the men's game, even though I don't really follow the men's game as much anymore until the tournament rolls around. But that South Carolina team has been really, really, really good this year. I mean, they've been ranked number 1 for a solid, at least in the top 5 for most of this year. So it's a team that nobody is surprised that they're in the Final Four.
Yeah.
So I would honestly, I'd love to see UConn in the Final Four. I'd love to see UConn win a national championship again.
Yeah.
Because I think Gino Auriemma is one of the greatest coaches in college sports history, right? I mean, he is how many championships he has? I don't know off the top of my head, but I know it's a lot.
So Gino, well, here's a crazy thing. I want to preface it with this. Brianna Stewart, who is from the same community I am, Central New York, went to CNS, played a year of basketball with my cousin Samantha Tortora, and then went on to UConn after being at CNS and won 4 championships in 4 years. And I believe that she was the MVP in all 4 of those years as well. So when you look at
That's right. They won 4 in a row with her.
Yeah, they won 4 in a row. Then she was the number 1 pick. She just won her first WNBA championship after being the number 1 overall pick.
11.
So she did that as well.
11 he has won. So 95, 2000, 02 through 04, 09, 2010, and then 2013 through 2016. They haven't won a national championship in 10 years? Really?
Can you look at his time at UConn, which started, this started even before I thought it did, but it started the year I was born, 1985-86. Team went 12-15. He got them in his 4th season they were regular season champions of the Big East, conference tournament champions of the Big East, and went to the NCAA tournament in 1988-89. He got them to the first Final Four under him at UConn. was in his 6th season there with them in the NCAA tournament, got them there. And then they were a champion in 94, 95. Back, that was crazy. That was in a season where they went 35-0. They were NCAA champion in 1999 to 2000. They were NCAA champion in 2001 and 2002. They were an NCAA champion in 2002-3, 2003-4. They were NCAA champion in 2008-9, 2009-10. They won the NCAA championship in 2012-13. They won in 2013-14, 14-15, 15-16. And then they made it to the Final Four in 2016-17, 2017-18, 2018-19. They made it in 2020-21, the COVID year, 2021-22. They made it in 2023-24. So they have made it to 6 Final Fours since 2016-17. But yes, the last championship that they won was in 2015-16. So this would be almost 10 years if they are to win it this year. I have them playing in the national championship game. In my prediction going into the tournament, I have UConn versus South Carolina, and I have Dawn Staley and South Carolina winning another championship.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising. I mean, South Carolina has just been really good in women's basketball in the last few years, and I don't think it would surprise anybody if they won another national championship. So, I'd love to see UConn. Obviously, I kind of, as a fan of Big East basketball, I will always have, a soft spot for UConn.
Yeah.
I mean, they are, UConn and St. John's are probably the 2 teams and 2 schools that, at any level, I will always have a little bit of a soft spot for, mostly basketball, because that's what I'll watch. St. John's, obviously, because my dad's a fan. He really became a fan again when Chris Mullen was their coach, and they did some good things for a while, and then he left, and now Rick Pitino's in there, and he enjoys watching them, and they had an unbelievable season. I know they're going to be back, and then we see UConn win back-to-back national championships on the men's side. Also, thank you, UConn, for filling my wallet that first national championship year, because I won an awful lot of money off of them winning the national championship that year. What were they? Were they a 4 seed that year? The first one, I think. I think they were a 4 seed. What'd you say? I'm sorry.
The UConn men?
Yeah. Not last year's national championship, the one before. I think they were a 4 seed.
Yeah, it was either 4 or 3.
Yeah. So, so I will always have a soft spot for them because of that. And, just seeing the UConn women, and realistically for me growing up watching, SNY and watching, Sportsnet in the mornings before I would go to school, they would have, they'd show UConn men and UConn women's highlights because that's included in, their coverage area. So
yeah,
I'd be seeing their highlights all the time. So like I knew the big names that, went to UConn on the men's and women's side, and they were always fun to watch. And most of the time UConn women were really good, and the men's team was pretty good in their own right.
Yeah.
With Jim Calhoun, and I'm drawing a blank on who took over for him and then won the second
Kevin
national
Ali.
championship. And thank you, Kevin Ali, and now with Brad Hurley, I hang on, Dan Hurley.
Yeah. How dare you forget that incredible first name? So
Brad Hurley is a local staple in basketball in my area. He was one of the he's one of the commentators for basketball for Blue Ridge 13, where I worked for a little while. And so shout out to Brad if you are listening to this. I haven't seen you in a while, buddy. So good to bring your name up. That was. I've always kind of had a little bit of a soft spot for them, and I'd love to see them make another Final Four and make another run in a national championship. Keep your bracket alive.
Yeah, it'd be great. I mean, the women have done a tremendous job in keeping my bracket going, and I appreciate them. I appreciate them very much.
Now, which bracket is better?
My bracket. Well, I had Houston and Duke. And so I would say my women's bracket is better right now because I have the chance of getting 3 out of the 4 Final Four, plus my 2 in the championship, plus my national champion.
There you go.
So, yeah, absolutely better. I'm looking back at UConn in 2023 just so we can have this little discussion about.
That's the only year they didn't make the Final Four since 2008.
UConn was a 4 seed. They won in the championship over 5-seeded San Diego State, 76-59. After San Diego State defeated FAU in that incredible run for FAU in the Final Four, they defeated them 72-71. And UConn defeated Miami, who were both in the same region in Albany. My dad and I went to go see games in the NCAA tournament in Albany, New York. And in those opening first couple rounds, round of 64 and the round of 32, my dad and I saw Miami play and we saw UConn play. And then those teams that made it out of that portion of the bracket went and played against each other in the Final Four. So of all the teams my dad and I could have seen in the entire country, the first time we've ever sat in an NCAA tournament game together, we saw half of the Final Four. When we saw UConn and we saw Miami, who both faced off 72-59. UConn defeated Miami. It was the farthest Miami has ever gotten in the NCAA tournament. And so that was huge. And ultimately, they lost to UConn. So UConn was a 4 seed that year, and
I thought so.
The Final Four featured, good on your part. The Final Four was a 4 seed UConn, a 5 seed Miami, a 5 seed San Diego State, and a 9 seeded FAU. So
it's hard to forget when you have a bracket like, because I think, if I remember correctly, I did have San Diego State in the Final Four. I don't remember that off the top of my head. I know I had UConn winning, but all I needed because if UConn didn't make it to the championship, I was going to come in, I think, third, because somebody had San Diego State in the final. But if they just had to get there, because I was ahead of the other guy that had UConn winning it all, and he didn't have any of the other Final Four teams.
Yeah,
I think I just needed UConn to get to the national championship. So they got there, and obviously I won that pool, and then I had another pool that I needed them to win for me to come in second, and then I had a bet before the tournament. I think I only bet $30 on it, and it was $30 to win like 600 or 700.
Yeah,
because, or maybe it was a little less than that, because their odds were like plus 1,700 or something like that before the tournament. And I was like, I really like this team, so let's let it ride. And the championship game goes around, and I said to my dad, like, should I cash this out or should I let it ride?
Yeah.
And he, naturally, because my dad is not a gambler, and he is usually very much against when I gamble, and he said that I should cash it out. And I thought about it, and basically leading up to game time, I definitely thought about it because I knew I had the one pool that I won, and if they won the other one, I was gonna, win more. So my thought was, I'm already up this much, let it ride, because my cash out was only like $100 or $150. So I was like, let's just let it ride, and obviously they won, and I won even more, and that win basically pays for my brackets for probably the next 20 years. Or more, depending, because my pools are usually only $20 to buy in per bracket, so they're not exactly like expensive ones. So that was that. I'll never forget that one for me. But obviously you remember the year with Kemba Walker.
Yeah.
When UConn won, what was it, 5 games in 5 days to win the original Big East, and then they went on to win the national championship, I think, as like a 6 or 7 seed.
It was typical that because the Big East was so, it continues to be, but because the Big East was so competitive and it was such a dogfight, that if you won the Big East and you went through the Big East tournament, you were so beat up by the time that you got to the NCAA tournament that nobody was doing that. Nobody was winning the Big East tournament and then winning the NCAA tournament. It was one or the other, and that was the year where the UConn Huskies showed that you can do both. which was insane. I
Was
think
that
they
was
won
that the 6 overtime year against Syracuse?
I think they won.
Was that year, or was that the 2014 one?
No, because Syracuse won that 6 overtime. So UConn.
Okay, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, UConn won.
Maybe it was the year after.
They won 11 games in a row.
That game's probably one of the greatest college basketball games of all time.
Oh yeah, people talk about it all the time. And I mean, I'll never forget it because Ross was over my apartment. I was living in Dunmore at the time, right down the street from obviously where we went to school at Marywood University. And Ross came over. The game started a little after 9:00, and the game ended in regulation, and they were going in overtime. And he's like, "All right, I'll stay. I'll stay to watch this." I said, "All right, cool." And then as time got later, he's like, "All right, I'll stay the second overtime. All right, I'll stay the third overtime." And it got to a point where he was like, "Well, at this point, like I'm not leaving. I can't leave." And the game that started a little after 9, I believe, ended at 1:20 in the morning. And then Syracuse had to get up and play Louisville the next round, and so ultimately they ended up losing. But yeah, it was.
You can't even blame them for losing that game, though. Wait a minute, wasn't that the year Louisville won the national championship?
Louisville won in 2013.
I think it was that year because UConn won and it was it 12 and 14 they won, or was it 14 and 16 they won? Because one of their national championships of those two, the men and women won.
Yeah,
now I gotta look. Now I gotta look this up.
Well, I'll look up. So 2013, I was at that. So the national championship, the Final Four in 2013 was Syracuse, Michigan, Wichita State, and Louisville. It's the actual bracket that the NCAA disregards. Like they took the championship from Rick Pitino, so technically Louisville didn't win it, even though they won it. But yes,
they won it.
So that was
I don't care. They won it.
So Louisville was the 1 seed, and Wichita State they defeated 72-68. Syracuse lost to Michigan 61-56, and then Louisville was the national champion.
It was 2009.
So yeah, that was
2009.
13 was the first Final Four that I physically went to.
Yeah, because I was like 90% sure that Syracuse made it to the Final Four of the year Louisville won.
Yeah.
But I didn't remember I couldn't remember what year this was because I do remember, I think I watched part of that game. I didn't watch the whole thing. I was 11, so I didn't, it was way too late for me to stay up. But regardless, that's one of the greatest basketball games in history. I think it was John Isner and Nicholas Mahut, I think is what it was, at the U.S. Open in the first round when the fifth set, I think Isner won like 70-68 in the fifth set. The match took like 3 days.
Yeah.
It was insane.
There's moments in history. In the 6 overtime game, whether you're a fan of Syracuse or you're a fan of UConn, whoever you like or you don't like, people know that game. People know that game. They talk about the game. It comes up every single year at some point. It's just something that sticks with it. Eric Devendorf hit the shot that would have ended regulation with a victory for Syracuse, but it was after the clock had hit 0. So that 6 overtime game wouldn't even have happened if he got the shot off just a little bit sooner. So just crazy how many overtimes, a guy's falling out, and our guys got, were guys even like, were they delirious at a certain point? So it was such a great game, such a great experience. The Big East is by far one of the greatest conferences in the history of any sport.
The OG Big East is just the original Big East with like Syracuse and UConn and Louisville and I think Pitt was in the Big East, right? Was in that conference.
The ones that left.
St. John's and all of those teams that were in the OG Big East. I wish you could put that back together. I really do, because that still would be a great conference. But I think the issue was, I think the issue was that the Big East didn't really play football. So I think part of it was right that they wanted to get like Louisville and Syracuse and the schools that had competitive football programs into more competitive football conferences. Is that I could be
So,
totally wrong.
football made the decision, and I mean, as it does in a lot of things, football was a deciding factor. The Big East had lost Miami, and the big people
Miami was in the Big East.
people forget that Miami was in the Big East, Boston College was in the Big East, Virginia Tech was in the Big East. For everybody that thinks Virginia Tech has always been an ACC rivalry, it's not true. So Virginia Tech was actually in the Big East first. And so when you look at the Big East and what they were, and then you look at the ACC, with the ACC, they now have 18 schools outside of football, which Notre Dame is independent, but they have 18 schools, Notre Dame, for everything else, including basketball. Well, there was a time where the Big East had 15 schools. And when the the ACC had 15. And when the ACC had 15, I had said that the Big East, at least for a couple years, was the best conference in men's basketball in the entire country, and that the ACC became the best conference in men's basketball in the entire country by gobbling up the Big East, because the ACC, when it was 15 members, 8 of those members ACC, 7 of those members former Big East. So in order to become the best conference, they had to take from the best conference, and they took Syracuse. Well, they originally took Miami and Virginia Tech, then Boston College, and then time went by. And then they took Syracuse, Pittsburgh, and Notre Dame. And then a year after that, in 2014, they took Louisville, because Syracuse's first season when they were in competition was 2013. It was announced in 2012, but Syracuse began competition in 2013, which would make sense because this is like, I think, year 12 or going into year 12 of them in the ACC. So, yeah, so the ACC became the best conference of basketball by taking and making itself essentially half of the old Big East, with 7 of the Big East and then 8 that were returning ACC schools. Now they have Cal, and they have Stanford from the Pac-12, and then they have SMU, who came from Conference USA, and then the American, to make up the 18 that they have right now. But yeah, I mean, the old Big East is phenomenal. The new Big East is phenomenal because the new Big East, honestly, is just missing a few pieces. If Syracuse went back to the Big East, if Notre Dame went,
I don't know why they wouldn't.
Because of football. Because the Big East. See, the thing with the Big East was when Miami left, Miami was the big one. It was the premier football team in the Big East. Miami would be if Clemson left the ACC right now. But Clemson arguably,
because if Clemson leaves the ACC arguably would cease to exist within half a decade.
So, but so Miami was the beacon. Miami was the national powerhouse. Miami was the name. And Syracuse had the history, but Miami had the name and at the time. And so when they left, it was a move that I'll never forget, because I considered it a dirty move. When Miami left, it was like they didn't turn their back on the Big East as Miami. They turned their back on everyone. And they left everybody kind of trying to scramble and figure it out. And so when they left, it was the beginning of the end. And then you look at Georgetown, doesn't have Division 1A FBS football. St. John's, I think, had gotten rid of their football team. Villanova has FCS football. So there were certain teams in the Big East that have Division II football, certain teams in the Big East that had Division I AA FCS football, and then you had Syracuse, and you had UConn, and you had South Florida, and of what was left, and Cincinnati. So they didn't have a lot of continuity. They didn't have a lot of parallels and a lot of things that make sense. People talk about membership having to look like each other, even if they're in different parts of the country and whatnot. And ultimately, Syracuse's football conference was hurting because they couldn't put Georgetown in it. They couldn't put St. John's in it. They couldn't put Marquette in it. They couldn't put Villanova in it. So the Catholic Seven, as they are called, departed from what the old Big East was. They went into a legal battle to keep the name and the logo. They won, which left the American with Cincinnati, UConn, and South Florida, 3 teams, trying to figure it out in all sports. And when they left them with the 3 teams, they had to figure out a new logo, a new name, a new mission, and then they had to go find membership, which ultimately created the American Athletic Conference in 2013. So, yeah, so Miami started the beginning of the end of Big East football, and then the Catholic Seven essentially just said, like, we don't have football, and if we do have football, it's not playing at the FBS level, so why don't we just commit to basketball? And to this day, the commissioner of the Big East has made it very, very clear, and I was there at Big East Media Day. I've been there the last couple of years, and I can't thank them enough for it, but the Big East commissioner had made the statement this year. Val Ackerman talked about the fact of we are a basketball league. We're the premier basketball league. We're basketball first. And it's worked out for the Big East that they have all these other sports, but they're looked to for basketball, and that's the focus. And so, I mean, would it make sense for Syracuse to go back and Pitt to go back and Louisville to go back and Notre Dame to go back? It absolutely would. But it doesn't make any logical sense football-wise, and monetarily getting pieces of the pie and whatnot. You're going to lose all that money that you're not going to get from football. But
well,
ultimately,
I mean, what if they went the well?
You can't go. You can't go the UConn route.
I can hold that.
UConn left.
That's exactly what my thought was.
No, UConn left their football team out to pasture. They screwed over Randy Edsall, and they left him. They literally left him to die. And so he decided to not go down with that ship and get blamed for it. And it wasn't his fault. And Randy Edsall's a good friend of mine. So, I mean, yeah, they can't do that. They would essentially have to form a new conference.
That's just for football.
A new Big East football conference. And then they'd have to go find associate members. And not that they can't do it. The Big East can absolutely exist. And football can absolutely come back. But
it used to.
In the model that they have right now, it wouldn't make sense for schools. Basically, you would have to think about this. Nostalgia, competition, geography, those would be the things that would have to take the place of money. The move to the ACC was a monetary benefit. Syracuse could suck in football, and they were still going to get a slice of the pie as if they were winning. So, where things are right now is that it suits Syracuse to be in the ACC, but people also have to understand, as good as the Big East was back then, I've been around the Big East for the last few years, and I've been on site for the tournament and on site for Media Day, and I could tell you this, and you've seen it nationally, the Big East, St. John's, UConn, Marquette, Villanova, I know after Jay Wright they've struggled, but you look at Georgetown's getting better, Creighton is good, Xavier has their moments. Butler's got to find a way to trend back up, but they did so much with Brad Stevens, back-to-back national championship games, and a shot that rolled out of the hoop on a half-court
Gordon Hayward, man,
against Duke. So, I mean,
so sad.
When you look at the Big East right now with Creighton and Xavier and Butler, and you look at Marquette, who's really made a home, and then you look at UConn returning, and Villanova, and Georgetown, and Providence, and so on and so forth, and St. John's with Rick Pitino now. The Big East is almost completely back. But if they were to pull in a Syracuse, not even all four, but if they got Syracuse back and they got, Notre Dame back, I think that would say a lot to it. Pitt hasn't been great in recent history.
You know who I think the perfect team for them to go get would be? And, it's not that they're going to add much to in terms of value for the full conference, but go get Rutgers back. Because that could be your first big domino to fall with regard to the teams that are, playing Division 1A football. They're in the FBS.
Yeah.
Right? Go get, I think that could be the first domino to fall, because you go get back Rutgers. That could pave the way for Syracuse, for Pitt, for Louisville. Right? I mean, pick from the ACC.
Yeah.
The Big East, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the Big East in almost every sport was one of the Power 5 conferences. It was. Nobody can argue with that. But, nowadays, they basically don't do anything with football, and it's all basketball, and that's about it. The baseball's not bad in that conference, but, it's basketball, it's, lacrosse, track and field, that's about it. It's not your nationally televised sports like you would have with football, other than basketball, really. But I think that could be the first domino to fall if they just had to go that route.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things, and I've talked about it on the show at length, and I've written articles about it. There's things that would make absolute sense. There's minor moves that certain teams can take, and it would change the dynamic and help it. The ACC getting Maryland back and bringing in West Virginia would be huge. And, keep in mind, too, West Virginia was also part of the old Big East. They left. So Miami left, and then West Virginia left for the Big 12. And that really helped to push Syracuse and Pitt and ultimately Louisville as well, because West Virginia left first. But, I mean, Rutgers hasn't really ever fit in the Big Ten. Maryland hasn't really ever fit in the Big Ten. West Virginia is a non-factor in the Big 12 most of the time, and without Bob Huggins, they're not doing anything. So, and they've changed coaches and whatnot, and they used to have Dana Holgerson at West Virginia for a million years. So, he did some good things, but there's certain moves that geographically can be made that would make sense for the Big East, that would make sense for the ACC. But if you really go back to it, when the Big East was being created and becoming a conference around 1980 and Syracuse was a founding member, there was the notion of Penn State and bringing Penn State into the Big East, and then the potential of having Notre Dame. If the Big East had pulled in...
Well, they had Notre Dame for everything but football, right?
But if they had pulled... Well, that's the thing. If they had pulled them in for football in the beginning, and if they had accepted Penn State, you would have had Syracuse, Penn State, Rutgers, Boston College, Pittsburgh, Notre Dame. You would have had all of these schools in the Northeast. And there's the reality that if Penn State had been accepted into the Big East during the Joe Paterno days and all of that, if that had happened and Penn State was locked in as a founding member of the Big East, that the Big East to this day would be surviving, would be thriving, because you could have argued, you could have, worked to get Notre Dame in. If decisions were made back in the late 70s, early 80s that involved Notre Dame as a full member and Penn State as a full member, there's the notion that if Penn State never went to the Big Ten and they were a founding member of the Big East, that we're not even talking about half of the stuff that happened over the last 20 years.
Is it wrong for me, though, to think that Penn State would have utterly dominated that conference unless Notre Dame came in?
Not necessarily, because at the time that it was all being put together, Syracuse was extremely successful. And Syracuse, keep in mind, in 1983, defeated number one seeded Nebraska in the Dome. Also keep in mind the fact that they had an undefeated season in 1987, and then that's not even including the early 90s, and then going to the mid-90s with Donovan McNabb and Kevin Johnson into Bucky Jones, and then Keith Bullock after that, and having Chandler Jones and Arthur Jones, who went on to become Super Bowl champions in the NFL. So, Syracuse at the time of Coach Mack, Dick McPherson, if they had had Penn State with them and Notre Dame with them, and you had Joe Paterno going up against Coach Mack, and then eventually Joe Paterno going up against Paul Pasqualoni, there's something to be said about how history in the Big East would be so different. And it's not even it's not even Notre Dame having to be a football member. If Penn State was in there football-wise with the pageantry and the history and the coaching, and you had a Boston College, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Penn State, and you had preserved old Northeast football, then, you would be putting yourself in a situation where the Big Ten would be potentially hurting in the
I was
last
just
2
thinking
decades. And then the Big Ten would have had to look for an identity.
Yeah, could that version of the Big East have taken down the Big Ten? Maybe if that's the case, it takes down the Big Ten, and you have Michigan and Ohio State and I'm trying to think of who was in the OG Big Ten team, like Wisconsin. Well, maybe Wisconsin, but most of the Big Ten East teams, maybe the Big Ten West teams could have gone to the Big 12 or something like that. But that That's an interesting. I'd love to kind of go through what we think could have happened. Maybe one day in the summer that there's not a whole lot for us to talk about sports wise. We can do that. To kind of just maybe go conference by conference as what would be an ideal shift in conference alignment that works good geographically and financially for these programs, and what could bring us back to I guess the good old days in college sports.
Well, yeah, I mean, I honestly would, we could do a show called "What Could Have Been," and we can go back to all the realignment moves, and if certain moves didn't happen and certain moves did happen, what would the climate of collegiate athletics look like right now if a couple pieces never shifted, or if a couple pieces did shift? What would that have looked like? If the Big East had Penn State, what would that mean for everybody else? If West Virginia, now, I mean, because you got to think about that too. Syracuse and Pittsburgh have rivalries with West Virginia. So you take those rivalries, then you put the Penn State rivalry in there. I mean, think about it. If the Big Ten doesn't have Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan, who are they?
They're nothing.
So
now they have, obviously now they have USC and UCLA and some of the schools out west, and Wisconsin's usually been pretty good. But I will say this: the Big Ten realigning has actually helped in college baseball and college softball, because having Oregon, having UCLA and USC has helped them on the diamond, on the baseball field and the softball field. So, I guess that's a factor too, because it's, kind of helping make those other teams rise up. I mean, Penn State's gotten off to a good start in baseball. Oregon's one of the best teams in college baseball at the moment.
Yeah.
So obviously all these decisions made are football decisions. And we knew Oregon football this year was going to be good and was going to, make a run for the Big Ten, and which they did. And, they got a tough draw in the playoff. There's not much you can do about that, but now you kind of see what we're kind of seeing now what it's doing for the other sports.
Yeah. With,
Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, UCLA and USC and Oregon in the Big Ten now. We're seeing some new schools going into the ACC and the Big 12 that are formerly of the Pac-12. And I think those particular conferences have benefited from it.
Yeah.
But we're also missing, kind of what we've talked about, where you've got these great rivalries that were conference rivalries, and maybe these teams aren't in the same conference anymore. Like Oregon State and Washington State don't have homes.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were playing in the Mountain West for football. I don't know what they're doing for the rest of their sports. You probably know better than I would.
What they did was Washington State and Oregon State for this season, they formed a scheduling partnership with the Mountain West and for football, and then for their other sports they joined the West Coast Conference. And now in the new iteration of the PAC, they will be taking from. I mean, I'm a firm believer that Washington State and Oregon State and the Pac-12 itself office, this is my belief, that they form partnerships with the West Coast Conference and with the Mountain West in order to have the opportunity to have open dialogue and to eventually use those relationships and that open door policy to steal, because they are taking a ton of teams from the Mountain West football wise, and
there's Boise State going there too.
Yeah, and from the Mountain West, they're taking Boise State, they're taking San Diego State, basically every team with state, Utah State, they're taking Colorado State, and
they should just be the Pac State Conference.
I literally said that.
Honestly,
I said if your last name doesn't end in state, you can't come. And then joining the West Coast Conference, they're taking Gonzaga. And Gonzaga doesn't have football, so in the new PAC, Gonzaga will become a PAC school. They will no longer be a West Coast Conference school.
Yeah.
So they've basically
I'd love to go through that one day. I think that would be great, and beginning of July, mid July, when like it's just baseball and we're kind of in like the dog days and there's not a whole lot going on, and I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and I think we could actually even do it in June because there's so much going on there that when it comes to thinking about it and breaking it down, and I've done this with my I've gone through it so many times, and I've thought about so many different avenues. I did a prediction of when the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas. I had predicted that the Pac and the American and the ACC could have eaten the rest of the Big 12. So there was a moment where
I remember we talked about that.
There's a moment where the Big 12 could have
probably what should have happened.
Could have been eaten up by other conferences, and the American, if they struck first, the American would have poached from the Big 12 instead of what actually happened, which is the Big 12 poaching from them, and the Big 12 wouldn't have 16 right now. The Big 12 would have dispersed, and ultimately Kansas would have gone to the ACC. I had some schools going out to the Pac-12. I had the Texas schools going to the American because the American has moved their home to Irving, Texas, and they already had a bunch of Texas schools. And if they had done that, what they would have been able, arguably, in my opinion, to keep Houston, to keep Cincinnati, to keep UCF, and the ACC would have gotten back to being a powerhouse when it comes to having Duke in North Carolina and then having Kansas as well. So there was this whole, and then West Virginia would have gone there. Maryland would have gone from the Big Ten back to the ACC in order to fill that spot in the Big Ten. Iowa State would have gone because Iowa State have a rivalry. So Iowa State would have left the Big 12, and then they would have joined the Big 10. So the Big 10 would lose Maryland, no big deal. Get Iowa State, which makes more sense for them geographically because they're Midwest. So there was all of these things that could have happened. And I wrote an article about essentially the flip, where instead of the Big 12 killing the Pac-12, the Pac-12 would have been involved in killing the Big 12, but the American and the ACC would have had to be factors in it. And then the Big 10 and the ACC would have adjusted just a little bit. The SEC would have been unaffected outside of Oklahoma and Texas coming to them. And, it would have...
Well, because that was set in stone before any of
literally, when those chips
happened.
fell... I was looking at the rest of the nation. Then I did a thing where I had an entire map up and I showed everybody where the conferences were. And I said, if you think the Sun Belt and the American Athletic are not smart, or if you're only paying attention to the quote unquote power, if you look at the Sun Belt and you look at the American, they're both, their region of where they take schools from is almost the exact model of the SEC. So even though it's not the Alabamas and the Floridas and whatnot, they're taking from media markets in the same states, in the same areas. So you might not be thinking about the American and the Sun Belt, but they are thinking geographically, monetarily, and just the way that they put the model together. If you're going to imitate anybody, imitate, the SEC for what they've done in the southern middle and the southeast, and really taking half of the country from the middle to the eastern part. They come all the way up to like the Mason-Dixon line and maybe a little bit farther. So if you just looked at the models and you started circling places, and then geographically you looked at why did someone do this, and then I talked about well in advance, over a year in advance, I said if the Pac had merged with the Mountain West, they would have survived. And then what did the Pac just do? The Pac just made a scheduling deal with the Mountain West and stole half their conference, if not more, to essentially merge, but to take it away. So they did what I said that they were going to do, but if they had done it sooner, they may not have lost the other schools.
Oh, absolutely. But, I think the ultimate coup de grace here is that the American missed their chance to really take advantage of the Big 12 starting to crumble. Right? You obviously lose Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Those are your schools. They were the Big 12.
Yeah. They're
right? And they're there every year in every sport, in baseball, in football, in basketball, in track and field, in lacrosse, in I'm not going to say hockey because I don't think I have a hockey team. Soccer. Whatever the sport is, they are the Big 12. It's basically those two in Oklahoma State. That's the Big 12 to most people. And it was always this super high-scoring football conference, and there was never any defense being played in the Big 12, and we all knew that. which is why people thought that Texas and Oklahoma were going to struggle in the SEC. Oklahoma did, Texas did not in year one. We'll see what happens in year two. But with those two schools going to the SEC, and we talked about this on the show, what the American could do, what the ACC could do, what the Big Ten can do, and what the Pac-12 could do.
Yeah.
To basically dissolve the entire Big 12. Because it wasn't the Pac-12 that was crumbling. It was the Big 12 that was crumbling. Right at our door, or right at our feet. Because their top two schools were gone. Half of their conference they stole from the American already.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was already there. UCF was already there. Houston was already there. Those were all American schools. So if you're the American Athletic Conference, why you missed your opportunity to go get your schools back and maybe bring in one or two others. Now, Oklahoma State, I think, probably would have found its way into the Pac-12, which I think would have maybe made sense. Maybe Big Ten. It depends on the situation. Big Ten, at least football-wise, is known as a cold weather conference, and Oklahoma is not exactly cold weather in the wintertime. Not, it's not Florida, but it's also not, central Michigan, where it's 20 degrees and snowing at the big house in Ann Arbor. But they could have taken from the Big 12. The Big 10 could have taken from the Big 12. The ACC could have taken from the Big 12. The SEC already took from the Big 12. How could you missed your chance to completely dismantle that conference?
Yeah.
Pac-12 would still be alive. The American would be bigger and better than ever. The ACC would have continued to get better. Obviously, we know the SEC got better, adding those two schools. Maybe in that situation, you're able to steal somebody from the SEC. Maybe you're able to steal a Vanderbilt from the SEC. Now, I don't think Vanderbilt would have been the team to go. It was just the first team that came in my head because Vanderbilt, at least, we all know Vanderbilt's a baseball school. And Vanderbilt in recent years has done very well in the SEC in baseball and quite a few other sports too, but we just know that they're not a good football or basketball program. But there's so much that these other conferences could have done to capitalize on this. And the Big 12, to their credit, did a good job of being able to stay alive.
Yeah.
Because when they lost those two schools, they were dead in the water. It was over for the Big 12. And then they went and raided the American, and they started to raid the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 completely dissolves. Basically, well, it's technically still alive, and it's coming back, but the Pac-12 as we know it dissolves, and there's nothing left. So, good on the Big 12 for being able to stay alive, but the Pac-12 obviously screwed something up by not trying to poach from the Big 12. But the American missed their chance, man. And it's sad. And I would have loved to see it because that would have made the conference a lot more competitive, I would think, in every sport. But by them continuing to lose these schools, they're just becoming less and less competitive every year. And it's not their fault. They're losing their best programs. Their best programs are going elsewhere. And now they're getting middle of the pack teams from lesser conferences to come in, and it's not the same brand of football or basketball or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's not their fault. And that's kind of what's happening with all these smaller conferences in college football and college baseball and basketball is these smaller conferences that are, have like 3-4 teams at the top that are usually very good, very competitive. They're coming in and they're getting poached. Houston and UCF and Cincinnati, when they're doing all these great things, they go to the Big 12. Now they're middle of the pack teams in the Big 12. Houston had a solid year, so they're a little bit, Houston is going to be up there a little bit more, right? And then you look at what's about to happen with the Pac-12. Gonzaga's going over there. Boise State's going over there. What's the Mountain West going to be in football without Boise State?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, it's been Boise State forever. It's been Boise State. Everybody loves the Smurf turf. People go there because of the Smurf turf half the time. So it's sad what's happening with college sports, and I wish you would just leave it alone and not change anything. Because in professional sports, you don't see that. When's the last time you saw a division or conference realignment in the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball? The last time Major League Baseball had a conference realignment was when Houston went to the American League to make it all even. Because Houston was in the National League up until I think it was 2011-ish, 2011, 2012.
Yeah.
Then they go to American League West just to even it out because the NL Central had 6 teams and the AL West had 4. So they put the Astros in the American League West and it was fine. Hockey has seen it because they have had 2 expansion teams in the last decade with the Vegas Golden Knights and now the Seattle Kraken. They've had to. They've gone to 4 divisions now, right? But you're only doing that because you're bringing in new teams. And sure, there's a lot less teams in pro sports than there are in college sports. But it takes away the tradition of what we see in college sports. We want to see Michigan, Ohio State every year in football. We want to see Duke, North Carolina every year in basketball. We want to see USC and Oregon in any sport, for that matter. These are these teams' rivals. Sure, most of them followed each other to the new conference, but why should they have to?
Yeah.
Like UCLA and USC, they were Pac-12 forever, Pac-10 forever. Back when it was the Pac-8, they were founding members of that conference, right? And then you got, other rivalries that are interconference, right? Pitt, West Virginia, Penn State, West Virginia. They're not in the same conference anymore. They're in 3 different conferences. And there's still rivalries. Your rivals should be in your conference. You should not have to go play a non-conference game for that. Florida State's got to play each other every year because Florida State's in the ACC, Florida's in the SEC. Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. You need to make it so that it's geographic. I don't know how many conferences it should really be because, you don't want them to be too big. But you need to go back to what geographically made sense. You have games played in conference where teams have to travel 3,000 miles to play a team in their own conference. The NBA and the NHL have the Eastern and Western conferences. It splits the country in half in the playoffs. It's not like the Brooklyn Nets are going and playing the Lakers until the finals. They're not playing them in the first round where you got to travel 3,000 miles to do that. That's, I think, the one disadvantage that baseball and football have. Yeah. Now, football, you're only playing 1 game a week. So, all right, you can afford to make that travel. But baseball, Mets, Dodgers, NLCS last year, you got to travel 3,000 miles in 1 day and expect to get adjusted to West Coast time or East Coast time and figure it out and play the next day. And you got 3 games back in New York. That's my one argument against what baseball does. I'm a traditionalist, so I don't really want to see it change, but I would understand.
Yeah.
We need to get back to geographic because we forget that these guys, they're just kids. Right? They're 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids. And you're expecting them to travel 3,000 miles to play a team in your own conference on a Friday or on a Thursday, and you expect them to fly back home and play another game on Saturday or Sunday. This could screw some of these kids up. They may struggle with the travel, with the time change.
Yeah.
You gotta remember, they're kids, they're human. You should not have to play a conference opponent on the other coast. There's a reason why these conferences are called what they are. The SEC is the Southeastern Conference, hence the southeastern region of the United States.
Right.
The Pac-12 The Pacific Athletic Conference, Pacific Coast, the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, Atlantic Coast, East Coast. Big 12 was meant to be in the Midwest, in the South, in the Midwest. The Big 10 was meant to be in the northern part of the Midwest. Maybe stretching a little bit into the Northeast, but not much.
Yeah.
I could go on about this forever, but we got more basketball to talk about. I think we need to have a show about this one day. Sometime when there's not a whole heck of a lot of sports going on. Because we definitely took up a chunk here. And I apologize for going on that rant, but we definitely took up a chunk of this show where we could have been talking about the Final Four.
Well, I mean, the thing is, no apology needed. I mean, and the article, and I will post it. I'll put it back up for y'all.
It's a great article, by the way, if you haven't seen it.
Thank you. And and so I wrote it back on July 6th of 2022. It's called Big 12, From Almost Death to Wild Rebirth. And it breaks down what's going on. I also wrote an article about the NCAA, about when a prediction becomes reality. And that's another one that I would suggest that you all read. So I linked one of them here. I'm going to link the other one in our feed for today's show, so you could definitely check it out. We're going to take a step aside here, final step aside. When we come back, Murph and I will touch on the Final Four here on the men's and women's side. I mean, obviously the women are figuring it out tonight, but we will do a little thing here for the men's side of things. We've talked about the women's side. I've already told you UConn and South Carolina was my prediction going in, and that remains the same. And so we will go to the men's side of things, talk about that, and then give a little baseball note before we hop out of here. Inside the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, joining you for lunch in your mid-afternoon today as I am in the great state of Florida. So I appreciate you ad-libbing with us. We'll be back right after this, after you hear from our incredible partners. Stay right here. In these unique times, there are those in our community that give us a sense of normalcy and positivity. Pizza Man on 50 Oswego Street in Baldwinsville has been here for you for over 35 years and is here now. Call 315-638-1234 or order online at pizzamanbville.com to bring those familiar tastes into your home. And remember to come see our monthly on-site broadcasts centered around the community and our Baldwinsville Bees. Pizza Man in Baldwinsville. Any way you slice it, they are always here for you. Looking for your next ride? Look no further than Great Lakes Honda City, located on 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard in Liverpool, New York. Serving our community for decades, their new and pre-owned vast array of vehicles are available to you Monday through Saturday on site. To search from home, shop at GreatLakesHondaCity.com. Call 315-365-5576 to set up an appointment. That's 315-365-5576 for Great Lakes Honda City, 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard in Liverpool, New York. Great cars, great people, Great Lakes.
All right, you need to come out here and get yourself the Brooklyn Pickle. I was talking about this with one of my buddies. I was like, yo, there's no better sandwich in the state of New York than the Brooklyn Pickle. And now that I found out that they're going down to North Carolina, we are taking over your taste buds everywhere you are, wherever you're going to be. You need to get yourself out to the Brooklyn Pickle. Pinehurst, you just realized that you found yourself the best sandwich shop that you're ever going to have. This is a glorious moment. It's a blessing to your community. You're welcome. Brooklyn in the house, baby. Go over to the Brooklyn Pickle. You already know what it is.
You heard the man. Head to Brooklyn Pickle Pinehurst on 1788 Old Morgantown Road in Southern Pines, North Carolina. Avicoli's, located on the corner of Route 57 and Wetzel Road in Liverpool, New York, has been your trusted neighbor for decades. Located just steps from Liverpool High School, we're happy to have the Liverpool Warriors on-site, on-location broadcast at Avicoli's through Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora every single month, featuring student athletes, coaches, and administration throughout the year from Liverpool High School. Head out to Avicoli's today on the corner of Route 57 and Wetzel Road in Liverpool, New York, open Tuesday through Sunday for lunch, dinner, and drinks. We'd love to see you out there, and of course you can call them at 315-622-5100 for takeout, delivery, and catering. That's 315-622-5100, and also find them on myavicolis.com. That's myavicollis.com. Having peace of mind when you're out of town that your furry-loving friend is safe and sound means taking them to Canine Campground, because we all know that when it comes to the love of our pets, it goes well beyond the call of duty to make sure they're safe and sound. Right, Lily? So take a ride to 242 Johnson Street in East Syracuse, New York, and see Canine Campground and where your dog will be staying in the classic cabin, the executive cabin, the grand cabin, or of course the luxury cabin, because if you know Lily, you know she loves luxury. Now you don't have to wait to the last minute to find a family member or a friend that'll take your dog for a few days. Call Canine Campground at 315-299-4013. That's 315-299-4013. Their drop-off and pickup times are Monday through Sunday. Check K9campground.com for more information. That's the letter K, the number 9, and campground spelled with a K.com. K9campground.com.
When you're going out of town, bring your dog to Canine Campground.
Looking for your next ride? Look no further than Great Lakes Honda City, located on 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard in Liverpool, New York. Serving our community for decades, their new and pre-owned vast array of vehicles are available to you Monday through Saturday on site. To search from home, shop at GreatLakesHondaCity.com. Call 315-365-5576 to set up an appointment. That's 315-365-5576 for Great Lakes Honda City, 7140 Henry Clay Boulevard in Liverpool, New York. Great cars, great people, Great Lakes. And welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. We are inside the Great Lakes Honda City studios, and Murph and I are here with you in the afternoon as opposed to the morning, as I am in our second home here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, the great state of Florida. And Murph and I got a lot of thoughts. We're going to hit the Final Four really quick here. Murph, Final Four coverage I will be having all the way through this week and this weekend, and then we will see the games that are going to tip off here. Once again, to let everybody know, the 4-1 seeds have all made it to the men's side of things for the NCAA tournament. The number 1 overall seeded Auburn Tigers, the second number 1, the Duke Blue Devils, the third number 1, the Houston Cougars, and the fourth number 1, Murph's Florida Gators. So they've all made it there to the Final Four. And as we look at the schedule, that schedule is going to take us to matchups on Saturday, April 5th. And on Saturday, April 5th, Florida will face off against Auburn at 6:09 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS. And then Houston will take on Duke at 8:49 approximately p.m. Eastern Time, also on CBS. And those tickets are going for around $250 a piece at their lowest. Final notes, Murph, on the Final Four.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting Final Four. Obviously, what'll be nice is we'll have next Monday some time to talk about who we think's actually going to win the national championship, because we'll have a national championship game set because the game is Monday night. I said it earlier. I think it's going to be Florida and Duke. I think that's what most people are expecting it to be. I don't see Duke losing to Houston. I think it's going to be their toughest test. But Duke really hasn't been tested all that much in this tournament so far. So who knows? Maybe they take Houston lightly, and Houston just comes out of the gate strong, and they can knock them off. I don't think Houston is the team to beat them, though. I think the team to beat them, one of the two teams that can beat them, is on the other side of the bracket. Personally, so I still think it's going to be Duke and Florida. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
And this is like the first time I actually feel good about taking my Florida Gators to win something and not making it a homer pick. Because I do genuinely think they can beat Auburn because they already did it. So I think it would be fun to see for sure. But Duke and Auburn, Duke and Florida is my prediction. We could still see all 4-1 seeds on the women's side. But I am still rooting to see UConn in the Final Four to beat USC.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be a lot of fun as we step forward here. I can't wait to see it. The women's Final Four, half of it, the other half will be decided tonight, so you have somewhere to be. Tonight, folks, ESPN at 7 p.m. and at 9 p.m. approximately tonight Eastern Time, watching these games that will decide who is going to make it through these other two parts of the bracket. And we'll see. Can Texas defeat TCU, or will TCU upend the number 1 seed? And then in the UConn case, will UConn best USC, or will USC have the last say in that bracket? So big things coming up tonight. Final notes on baseball, Murph? Anything you want to say about that?
The Yankees with their bats. This is a really interesting story if you haven't heard about it. They had I want to say he was some sort of engineer that kind of figured out that they could move the sweet spot or the barrel further down towards the handle, and they would hit more home runs. So it has worked so far for the Yankees, and I am interested to see how long it could, because it is legal. There is nothing in the rules that says it is not legal. It is, I guess maybe borderline illegal, but it's not illegal. So I'm interested to see what they continue to do. They had a great opening series against the Brewers. So realistically, Aaron Judge already has 4 home runs doing Aaron Judge things, as we know. And I'm interested to see what they do, because their pitching hasn't needed to be good. We knew that was going to be their big question mark when Cole went down, and it hasn't had to be good. So realistically, with where they're at right now, it's anybody's guess. But I wanted to bring that up because that is obviously it's a developing story, and it's very, very interesting, and I'm curious to see where it goes.
Yeah, so we will see what's going on with the bats. I will potentially see that firsthand when the Diamondbacks face off against the Yankees, as my dad and I will head to Brooklyn here, or Bronx, pardon me, in just a little bit. I miss Brooklyn, but I also miss the Bronx. So we will be in the Bronx coming up this week, and I'm excited for that. And, of course, down here in the great state of Florida, in just a little while, the women will be having their Final Four in their national championship game in Tampa. So excited to see that as well. Murph, as always, I appreciate the time, appreciate having you here, appreciate the fact that we got to do this in the afternoon and join everybody for lunch. And I'll look forward to being back at our same normal broadcast time at 9 a.m. this coming Monday on Wake Up Call with DT and Murphy.
Yes, sir. Looking forward to it. Go Gators. Let's go Mets. And we'll see you next Monday. And we'll pick a national champion.
There we go, because it'll be on that Monday. All right, Murph, take care of yourself. Be well.
Yes, sir.
So that coming for Brendan Murphy one more time here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets that thing called life. Like I said, today we had to change up the time a little bit as I'm on the road in the great state of Florida. So I want to thank you for being with us in the afternoon as opposed to the morning, when we are with you typically Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And you know that we are with you on YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both /WakeUpCallDT, and on WakeUpCallDT.podbean.com. We'll take our final step aside, wrap up today's broadcast of Wake Up Call from inside the Great Lakes Honda City Studios right after this.
Carvel DeWitt, it's what happy tastes like. Do you know why? Because we make ice cream. Creamy, rich, flavorful ice cream. Not yogurt or iced milk like some of our competitors. Ice cream. Fresh, by hand, daily. For the calorie conscious, we have something new for you. Our new Carvelite. Same great flavor, creaminess, and texture of our regular ice cream with only 35 calories an ounce. So whether you want an ice cream cake, flying saucer, dasher, carvalanche, hard or soft ice cream, we will satisfy your craving with our fresh, handmade regular or new Carvelite ice cream. Carvel DeWitt. It's what happy tastes like.
The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is located on 3680 Milton Avenue in the Home Depot Plaza. It is your family-friendly sports bar and restaurant. Folks, some sports bars aren't family-friendly. Some family-friendly restaurants are not sports bars. The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is proud to be both. It is that marriage that you've been looking for years. The Wildcat Sports Pub is your home base for your sports bar and restaurant needs, games for the kids, indoor and outdoor activities, and enough things on the menu to come back every single week and get to try something new. They're open Sundays from noon to 8 p.m., Monday through Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Thursday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to midnight. For reservations and party information, call 315-487-2222 for the Wildcat family-friendly sports pub and restaurant.
GG Cards and Breaks. Like, comment, subscribe.
GG Cards and Breaks coming to you on 639 Delmar Place in Syracuse, New York is your one-stop sports card and trading card shop. You will find everything you need there, all of the materials to protect your cards, the sleeves, as well as all different size top loaders, the one-touch cases, boxes, as well as binders and showcases, all on site, on location at GG Cards and Breaks. You'll also find hockey, baseball, basketball, football, soccer, as well as AEW, Disney Lorcana, Lunch Pail Kids, or Garbage Pail Kids, Garbage Pail Kids, Disney Lorcana, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and more. While supplies last, there's singles, there's graded cards, there's packs, there's boxes. You could be a big kid any time of the year, any moment of your life. And that's the beauty of it all, is to be a big kid. It's run by big kids. It starts with Josh and Anthony and the way that they are with sports cards and trading cards, and it trickles through the entire team. I can't thank GG Cards and Breaks enough for helping me to have memories as an adult that I also had as a kid, and just incredible moments where I get to collect something cool, feel close to my team, feel close to the sport, feel close to my favorite players, and to truly be able to do really cool things for people that I love, as well as do nice things for myself and add to my collection. GG Cards and Breaks is second to none, and you'll find them on 639 Delmar Place in Syracuse, New York, Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 6, and on Sundays from 10 to 5. With that being said, inside the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, thanks for watching and listening to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. We'll be back to our normal broadcast hours of 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, and you will find us right here on YouTube.com and Facebook.com, both /WakeUpCallDT, and on WakeUpCallDT.podbean.com. You can also find us by going to Amazon Music, Audible, iHeartRadio, as well as iTunes and Apple Podcasts, Player FM, Podbean, Podchaser.com, Podvine, Spotify, TuneIn, and YouTube. All you have to do is search Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, or one word, Wake Up Call DT. Make sure to follow and subscribe on each of these wonderful channels. You can also make sure to head out when you're in North Carolina. Make sure to go say hi to our wonderful partner down in North Carolina, Brooklyn Pickle and Southern Pines, down the road from Pinehurst Golf Course. From New York to North Carolina, that amazing sandwich that you can get at Brooklyn Pickle is now down in North Carolina. I love the BP. I love the turkey sandwiches. There's so many great things at the Brooklyn Pickle, and all you got to do is go to 1788 Old Morganton Road in Southern Pines, North Carolina, to go and get yours today. Let them know that DT sent you. And, of course, many thanks to our team of partners in Central and Upstate New York, Great Lakes Honda City, Carvel DeWitt, the Wildcat Sports Pub, GG Cards and Breaks, Servo-Mation, Avicoli's, Ma and Pa's, the snack capital of the world, Canine Camp Dog Daycare, Mother's Cupboard, Chick-fil-A Cicero, Pizza Man, Brian's Landing, and of course we are the exclusive multimedia marketing partner of your Lemoyne College Dolphins. It's Fins Up every single month on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Find your Dolphins Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern Time with student athletes, coaches, administration, future Dolphins, and alumni. All you have to do is find us on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt, and you will subscribe as well as hit the notification bell and find our Lemoyne playlist. The Dolphins are also on wakeupcalldt.com's homepage and underneath the exclusive partners tab. For more information, go to lemoynedolphins.com and Fins Up. The Bryan and Stratton College Bobcats of Syracuse are exclusive multimedia marketing partners with Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Find your Bobcats in the Bobcat Buzz. Student athletes, coaches, and administration monthly right here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, including our amazing trip to Buffalo and being a part of the team on the bus, at the team meetings, at shoot around, at practice, and on the sidelines of the games. Something I've never gotten to do before. The Bobcats and I make history all the time, and you got to check that out as well as all of our videos on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. Click subscribe, hit the notification bell, find the BSC Syracuse playlist. You also find the Bobcats by going to wakeupcalldt.com's homepage and underneath the exclusive partners tab. For more information, go to syracuse.bscbobcats.com and go Bobcats. The Binghamton University Bearcats are exclusive multimedia marketing partners with Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. Find your Bearcats every single Tuesday by coming right here to Wake Up Call at 10 a.m. Eastern Time worldwide, and you'll find student athletes, coaches, and administration telling their incredible stories and sharing their journey with us. And of course, the Bearcats are with us every single day on youtube.com/wakeupcalldt. Click subscribe, hit the notification bell, find the Binghamton playlist, and the Bearcats are also on wakeupcalldt.com's homepage and underneath the exclusive partners tab. For more information, go to binghamtonbearcats.com and go Bearcats. With that being said, here on Wake Up Call, I want to thank Brendan Murphy. We'll be back to our normal scheduled time next week for Monday, and we'll be back at our normal scheduled time this week, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for hanging out with us in the great state of Florida. Facebook at Wake Up Call DT, X at Call DT, Instagram at WakeUpCall_DT. As always, God bless, no stress, do your best. From the Great Lakes Honda City Studios, remember, you are a treasure, you are amazing, and God loves you.